Hello everyone, welcome back to the KMTRADERS channel. So this is the full market analysis volume 121. So just going to give an insight what we've got for next week and also compare our analysis from last week as well. So looking into gold, so we were looking for probably some sort of drop and then we're expecting this kind of turnaround kind of motion. So we started to see that pretty much through the midweek of last week. So we started to see the fall and then we started to see price kind of recover. So ideally that's what I'm trying to kind of get into. It is pretty much looking for those longs for it to start to look into 2100 plus. Again, really it just depends where the EMAs are following, but following on from price action, we've just been dropping and dropping, and like I said, I'm just waiting for that push aggressive move up. So I'm seeing already the strength trying to kick in. Again, it's dependent on if we can have that strength to continue pushing up higher early throughout May, really. So we'll see if we can get this turnover action. And really, this is pretty much kind of the same basis with the US dollar pairing. So we'll check out EU and NZD USD, AU USD, and they'll have sort of similar kind of rotations on in terms of direction. So let's move on to now EU. So what I was mentioning from last week is we're pretty much going to be either stuck in between two kind of options where we'll start to see price dropping lower and then we'll start to see some sort of reaction. So we got here around this here, so pretty much it's starting to consolidate. So from here I'm suggesting that we could start to experience some moves now to the upside. If we start to consolidate a little bit more, then there is a possibility that we can still drop lower and then rally higher. So I'm just keeping options open for that. So if that's the case, then I'm going to be looking for something like this, where we will expect price to drop just a little lower, and then we could probably expect some sort of bounce back. The other option that I'm suggesting or potentially looking into while we're in this range within last week, we could be looking at some sells. So with that, if we do take some sells, we could look at price pushing lower as a short-term hedge, if you will, rather whilst we're waiting for those bull runs to kind of come and kick in, if that makes sense. So that's what I'm looking at for EU. Not exactly a busy week compared to its previous ones, but we can't expect price to continuously drop and drop and drop. It has to kind of react and respond in the countermeasure way. So taking a look at NZD USD, so with this one we've had pretty much a nice pop to the upside, a nice momentum counter to the upside. Again, this could be confusing. This could have trapped some traders out thinking that we're going long. Again, this is the momentum kicking out for the sellers and early buyers still. So I'm just, like I said, again, just waiting for that correct timing, and hopefully we can start to get into those longs, ideally, that I've been waiting for a very long time, and hopefully we can start looking at some price moves to the upside. So the second scenario that I kind of looked at was if we were to take on some sells, and if we were to go a little lower, we would probably push up and then push lower. So it was roughly around here. So we had that little dip up and then price moves lower. So something just to consider there. Moving forward for this week though, however, we could be possibly looking out for this motion, but probably I'll be looking out for something like this, really, just continuing on those sells and seeing how far we can still run to the downside still. So we may, what end up might happening is when we open tomorrow, Monday morning, it might just completely start melting, and then we could have that rally up. So something like this. Again, this is not drawn to the exact levels. It's just a kind of guideline in routing of what we're trying to look for. So something like that. We're going to be trying to look out for that pop back up. So we'll see where we can go on from with NZDU. Looking into AU. So with this, we were probably looking out for some kind of rally to the upside. A nice pop up. As you can see, price started to rally to the upside and it's kind of recovering. We're not entirely sure if this is the strength in the market that's needed for this to actually turn over properly. Again, it could be a way for price to go lower. So it could, again, this is the second scenario that we could be anticipating. So price may want to push up, and then it could start selling off again and to go into about 70, so 0.7. And then if that's the case, if that happens, then we could be looking at some rejection, wherever that lies, that's when we can start to look for those buys. Ideally, that's what I'm going to be trying to look for. Again, actually executing that is another story, but we need to just wait and see what the kind of candlesticks are showing us first. So moving on to now USD JPY. So we're going to take a look into the Japanese yen pairs. So again, for this, I was pretty much looking out for some drop off, so some potential sell off in momentum. As we looked at the previous week, it was just strengthening very aggressively to the upside. So what we can see now, there's a bit of a pause, so we're starting to see some price dropping lower. Now for this, I've got two options in mind. So we could get an early break to the downside, or we'll continue pushing higher and then we could get a break. But ideally this could put us at a disadvantage, because we're looking into sells when we're not necessarily sure that there are sells. So we have to be mindful that this could be a more riskier kind of position to take a part on. So what I would say, if you want a bit less risk, if that's even a thing in trading anyway, what I would probably suggest is just waiting for more candlesticks which indicate sells. And what I'll probably then look for is just waiting for a retest trade. So right now we're still early days, so we could end up seeing price just consistently pushing higher and higher. And if that's the case, then buys are probably going to be our hedge into next week before looking into those sells. So taking buys probably isn't a bad scenario. It's just being mindful that sells can come into play at any moment. So it's up to you if you want to wait for that. And but yeah, we'll have to see what happens with UJ. So taking a look into CJ, so CAD JPY. So so roughly around here. So what I was looking for is a potential drop, and then some sort of rally to the upside, or probably pushing into the top band of 103 within this kind of range. What ended up happening, we just consolidated very choppy. So it was quite difficult if you did get involved in this pair. But for this week, what I'm probably looking for is something like this. So if we start to get a bit more dip, I'm not sure if we'll stay within 101, but we could drop a little lower to 100 or 105, 100, and then spike back up, and then depending on here, if we can break higher or if we have rejection and then sell off, that's definitely on the card. So that's why I'm going to probably put that there as a second scenario next to it. If we do see any sells in momentum, it's most likely going to be on that side, but again, anything can happen. So I don't want to be I don't want to focus yourself on one idea, and if totally something else happens, and like I said, you have to be adapting to the market, and trying not to be so adamant on my routes, if that makes sense. So just try and look at any kind of style, adjust to whatever price action is telling you, I guess. So so moving on to now EJ, so Euro JPY. So with this, what I'm going to be looking for is pretty much this idea of selling. I mean, this week has just been very choppy, hardly done nothing, if I'm being honest. It still gave you a nice 100 pip, but I think trying to even participate within this market was quite difficult because of a whole range bound within itself, and EMAs were not just clear for me. Price were just really hovering around that and not really doing or saying anything to me in that sense. So we had a nice rejection. We're just going to wait and see and wait for the more momentum to kick in. In terms of our analysis, so I'm pretty happy with this. What I'm going to be looking for is the ideal possibility of sells, but then on the other side, we've got the idea that if price is to pop up a little bit, which it has done, there could be a possibility where price drops lower and then starts to pop back up. But again, we need to kind of stay aware of what's price doing in where it's building up to. So there is a countermeasure that price may do something like this and break higher, I'll probably leave that as a third scenario, or in this case I've placed it as a second, but you know, just imagine that this is a third one. But that's ideally what I'm going to be expecting with EJ, one of the three ideally, and then we can just see what happens and adjust on a day-to-day basis. So looking into AJ, so for this one, pretty tricky with this. So we was here last week. So what I was looking for, so I've got three scenarios drawn. Ideally, I was looking for some sort of retest and push higher, but ended up dipping just a little lower. So arguably, you could say there, but I don't want to force it because, you know, I don't think I actually discussed that scenario in the event where price came, if price was to drop a little lower. But in this scenario where we are right now, we're potentially, so we've broken above higher, above this high, potentially on a retest point. So if we're able to find some support here, we could rally up. So I probably will leave this on for now, but just kind of adjust it to something like this. Again, and we're not 100% sure if this is going to kick off up to the upside, but if it was, it's going to be some sort of scenario like this. So price may drop a little lower and then rally up. It can pretty much do whatever it needs to do, to be honest. And then the second scenario I'm going to go with, if we're going to have, if we do pop up to the upside, we could reach potentially 95, 94. If we find some rejections on that, we could start to see price selling off. Again, I'm not entirely too sure how far we could go, so I'll just leave it equal length. And then finally, as a third scenario, if we start selling off aggressively right now, if we do break lower, we could look for something like this as a break and retest to go lower. So that's ideally what I'm potentially looking into for next week with AJ. So finally, for the last two pairs, USD Chef. So this has been really good. Again, if you've been trending with this one and following this one should have been a really good pair for you guys. What I'm trying to look for, so again, last week we looked at potential dropping off and lower. So again, momentum's been kicking up. What I'm trying to do, again, like I keep saying, is we're trying to look for some sales, but again, as I was mentioning with EU, I believe that there's no point trying to, sorry, UJ, we're almost, you know, guessing at this point if it's a sell, because the main trend has been pushing up. So what I would recommend again with this is, if you're waiting for sales or looking for sales, the other way you can look at it is, rather than guessing, is to wait for a bit more confirmation candle. So, you know, if you did take this sell, I mean, and you lost out here trying to sell, don't feel too bad. I think most people would have tried to sell this, as it's been, you know, consistently pushing higher. So again, don't feel too disheartened if you did get stung with UJ. I know a few people did, but with the same thing again, I'll just have to again suggest the same thing, that because there's no clear momentum showing to the downside, you know, there is an option where price can obviously continue pushing higher. Again, we're not entirely sure where that push up is going to be and where the pullback is going to be, but again, it's all kind of, you know, relative to how price performs on day to day. And then the other one is we're looking for those sales, so I'm going to wait for that and see if I can get involved. But yeah, finally for today is USD CAD. So interesting enough with this, so we started here, so 28, 29, yeah, so we had a very sharp bounce back up, pretty much price sold off, and then we had a pretty much kick back up. So very nice, pretty much almost pinpoint accuracy with this, in the sense of you know, calling a sell, I believe, if the annotation is correct on what I mentioned last week, I believe so, but yeah, and then a buying opportunity towards the upside. So for this week, what I'm going to be anticipating is pretty much this idea of possible continuations higher. But again, we're coming to this area where we're, you know, we're pretty much deciding if we're going to turn over. So this is why I'm very curious for these two things to happen. So we could expect this as a scenario, or we'll expect something like this. And maybe it could be a combination of both, you know, depending on how price is going to react Monday morning and throughout the whole week, I guess. So we just need to wait for that and see what the outcome is in regarding US dollar. So I think that will be all for us, you know, analysis wise covered for this week, covered through everything from last week. And you know, a few of the pairs were kind of off, and some of them were kind of accurate, I'd say. Hopefully, you know, you managed to get some pips and some profits on your side. But with regards to this week, I can't think of anything on top of my head in terms of important news. I believe NFP was last week, so it was a bit of a tricky one. But apart from that, I do wish you the best of luck for this week, and stay safe out there, guys. And that'll be all from us. So if you did enjoy this video, make sure you leave a like, and if you did get any value, make sure you're subscribed, and I hope to see you next week, guys. Thank you all. Bye.